A few weeks ago, I talked about how monarchies can get started in different situations. There were three different ways that monarchies have been started in the past. They were basically, very simply, the white horse, the savior, king style, Napoleonic monarchy type figure. Then there's the voting for monarchies, as happened with the Emperor Maximilian in Mexico. And then the third option is the grassroots option, and that was the option that we picked in that video as being the most likely option to succeed in the United States. Unless by some miracle we monarchists do get our savior king, the return of the king, the Arthurian king, mythological type figure. So today my intention is to go over, all right, say we want to do a grassroots option. What will that actually look like? Let's talk about the planning stages of what such an endeavor might have. What would actually go down, and what would be the steps in the process of accomplishing such a thing? So let's get into it. The first things that we really need to do if we're thinking about the process of how to start a monarchy is you have to define your goals. You have to decide what is it exactly that we're hoping to accomplish with this thing. And these goals can vary based a little bit they can vary based on the monarchists involved. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of monarchists today are constitutional monarchists. And I find that to be very amusing in some ways, because constitutions are a direct product of the Enlightenment era, Roman institutions, which we think of when we think of republics, not republicans, two very different things often. And my goals might be different from some of these other monarchists that are interested in starting monarchies. And these goals and everything can vary depending on your locality, can vary depending on your belief systems, can vary depending on your path, your dreams, your ambitions, all those sorts of things. So, to me, I've got a few goals listed down here that I think are just essential for starting a monarchist movement, a real monarchist movement, not just a bunch of guys typing away on a keyboard somewhere, but, something real. And the first thing is, you just can't have a dreamy ideal. You can't just say, we want a monarchy someday and that's it. You have to have concrete, definable goals that you can write down, that you can talk to with other people, that when people have questions, you can say, well, one of our goals is this and this and this thing. And one of my biggest goals with monarchy and the whole idea of monarchy is sustainability. And sustainability is going to cover a multitude of issues. So that's going to cover your environmental impacts. It's going to, because we don't want to just chop down the forests and build a town for no reason if there's a smarter and more intelligent way to accomplish something. And it's going to take into consideration the longevity of your project and whether or not your project has the capabilities of withstanding societal pressures, the capabilities of withstanding journalistic pressures, and eventually legal pressures. All of these things will necessarily happen. And sustainability, I think, is critical to the whole conversation, because if you build a functional ecosystem, it's going to be naturally resilient to outside stressing factors. If you build a system that's based on wishy-washy dreams and ideals, you're not necessarily going to be prepared to deal with problems when they come up. And it is important to recognize that a lot of times these things have a very natural flow to them. Sometimes things happen outside of the scope of what we would expect. Sometimes unexpected things happen, and that's fine. And you can go perfectly natural. That's just human nature, but you will succeed more. You'll have a greater chance of succeeding if you have a plan in place. And my second goal here is sociability. We are not looking to become isolationists, nor do we want to create a community of closed doors. The whole idea of the traditional model is to provide a place for like-minded individuals to get together and to celebrate that which makes them homogeneous, that which makes them human, and that which makes them them. So if you have a wildly disparate group of individuals with massively different ideals, massively different belief systems, it's never going to work. You're going to end up with an absolute nightmare as parties vie for power. And that's normal because if you have multiple ideologies, those ideologies typically do not coexist nicely together. You can have your Roger Williams, of freedom of religion and freedom of expression and everything else, but eventually if you do that, you're all going to end up being Muslim because the Islamicists don't really tolerate freedom of expression. And if they're the only ones that don't tolerate freedom of expression, well, you're going to be Muslim. And if you don't want to be Muslim, you need to have a solid, defined, traditional belief system that you say, okay, this is what we want and nothing else. That doesn't mean that you have to be intolerant of other belief systems to the point where you're out there, lynching and burning people at the stake. We don't have to do that, but you can say you can believe whatever you want behind closed doors, but publicly, the only morals that we are going to accept as legitimate are these morals, and any attempt to subvert these morals will be met with societal backlash. You can do whatever you want in your own home. It's your home, it's your belief systems, it's your heart. Nobody can affect that, nobody can change that. But we will never make laws, and we will never tolerate social dissent for things like if you're a Buddhist, the worship of Jesus Christ. I don't know, whatever. But you can't tolerate the anti-traditional aspect, which is having multiple belief systems all perfectly having equal rights in your system. It won't work. It'll just fall apart. If you want to have a bunch of, if you're a bunch of Buddhists and you want to have a traditional monarchy and that's what you want to do, be Buddhist. Don't attempt to be this wishy-washy nothingness because that's going to break down. And of course, I am a traditional Christian, so my belief systems demand that the monarchy, that my concept, my goal is a traditional Christian monarchy, specifically an Orthodox Christian monarchy, because that's the only traditional method. So that's number 2 is sociability. I actually got a little bit off track there. I jumped ahead a little bit. But in terms of sociability, it's extremely important to have a system developed to foster social relationships, because if you develop a system where everybody is just living in their own tiny little houses and nobody's coming out and seeing each other, you will never develop a traditional community. You will never develop reliance on each other. You will never develop relationships within your community. And the biggest thing that you need to foster if you're attempting to do something like this is positive, reinforced relationships. That means that you have to sometimes kick out bad actors. You can't tolerate, pedophiles in your midst, because it's going to undermine the trust of the community in the community itself. Therefore, you have to have some rules. You have to have basic social understanding. You have to be tolerant of people that are bad actors, but not, pedophile level bad actors, right? Like, you can't tolerate certain things, but you have to tolerate other things. And part of that has to be just built into the consciousness of your community. You have to understand what you're doing and why. You have to have community outreach. You have to have community building events. You have to have a system that is heavily reliant on perhaps barn raisings and other traditional meetings and greetings. You need to have festivals. You need to have cultural events. You need to be focused on community building. You need to make sure that you have farmers markets. You need to make sure that you are supporting local things. Everything that you can do to support the local community, you should be doing. And this needs to be a culture of supporting local. You do not want to fish for large corporations to come into your community. If they do come into your community, they must be considered an outside influence, and they should be taxed heavily. They should be restricted, because what you want to accomplish is a tight-knit community. And as your community grows, it will then be able to tolerate larger organizations without a fundamental disruption of your community. But in the beginning, especially, it is absolutely critical that everything that you do is focused on the social aspect. And working from home and doing other things is very, very helpful. The other thing that you can do to promote sociability is is working with a local currency for different things, where you are buying and selling based on the community currency, which is essentially a concept of when we go and interact with each other. I've got 500 community bucks, and the only way that I can spend these is at the farmer's market. Well, then that's going to drive me to say, well, these are literally useless in any other aspect other than engaging with my local farmer. And that sort of thing is actually really great when you're really small. When you get big, things can, change a little bit, but everything in this, early concept is designed around the idea of starting small, because let's face it, there's not that many monarchists out there today, which is a real shame, but we'll fix that. The third goal really is to develop an environment that fosters tradition. And this goes along with what I was talking about earlier with your traditional mindset, with your ideology. Because if you have an environment that fosters creativity within your ideologies, you're going to end up with a very different ideology with the kids and a very different ideology with the parents, because the parents are going to have whatever their ideology that they worked on, and then the kids are going to come and innovate, and it's going to be different from what the parents have, and you're going to create rifts within each other. So the other thing that you can do is you can design buildings to be multi-family units, meaning that you foster traditions with your families, though this is very common in places like Germany, believe it or not. This is very common all over Europe, actually, where they would have buildings where the second floor would be where the young couple that's just had kids, they go and they live up there, or maybe they're on the ground floor. And, depending on your family dynamic or however you want to do it. But the one family lives upstairs and the parents live below, and the parents get to live there forever, and the kids will take care of them, and you can eliminate nursing homes with this method. And this is the traditional family method. It is very unnatural for families to be separated from each other. Your social safety net is designed by nature to be your family. And the more that you can foster family as your social safety net, the closer the community is going to come together. Because remember, family is the number one building block of a traditional society. So everything that you can do to foster good, healthy family relationships, you should be doing. The other thing that's necessary is a church. If you're going to attempt to establish a monarchy in any place in the world, you must have a real cultural center. And no, community gyms are not going to cut it. You have to have a source of morals as the lodestone, the bedrock, not the lodestone, the bedrock, the cornerstone of your community. And this is absolutely critical. You cannot have a community without some form of social pressure to behave in a particular way, because guess what? That's what people do. And people are going to pressure each other. So the question becomes, who do you want pressuring the people to act in a certain way? And the traditional response is always the God people, the people that are going to be the most godly, or not even necessarily godly, we would hope, but the people are going to be the most interested in what God wants for individual lives. That's who you want to be the primary social, who you want to affect your social culture the most. And a traditional church is the only church that is going to have the opportunity to do this long term, because unfortunately, in certain other, if you have for example, one of these churches where, you're a break off of another church, or, unfortunately, a lot of Protestant denominations are going to really struggle in this area because innovations within doctrine are extremely normal and there's no hierarchy to keep that church from changing. So when you have a pastor die and the next pastor comes in, or the pastor's fired and a new pastor comes in, often the doctrines of that particular church change based on the pastor himself. So it's extremely difficult for that model of church, which is basically church by church by church basis, your community church. That kind of church can change really easily, and so that makes it for a very anti-traditional method. So it's much better to have a church which is governed by an authority which is greater than itself. If you have a church which is governed by an authority greater than itself, it is less likely to change and break tradition and smash the whole thing to smithereens. Because remember, as I said, the church is the cornerstone of your project. And if you cannot get a church involved in the project, you are going to fail eventually. Because if there's no moral backing, you are really asking for it, because basically you're going to be developing a community based on you. And that is a very shaky foundation, because as soon as you're gone, everything you've worked for is going to break apart, and that's not traditional. We need to have models which are based on long-term thinking, and traditional churches are the best way to accomplish that. The fourth goal here is economic viability, because you gotta think long term. So you can do a real isolated little village in the woods somewhere. Motor vehicles these days help to connect us to each other, but think bigger than that. One of the reasons why there's a significantly higher population density on the coast is because the water makes for an extraordinarily excellent economic engine. And the truth is, if you're going to establish a monarchy today, one of the big things that is going to happen is people are going to look at you and they're going to judge you. And the number one thing that they're going to judge you on is economic viability. Additionally, you don't want to be poor. Nobody wants to be poor. Everybody wants to do well. So base your models off of the extremely beneficial systems developed by the small and local monarchies in other parts of the world. Think your Monacos and your Liechtenstein and your Andorras, your very small principalities, which are going to be extremely economical, extremely viable, and they are some of the best places to live in the world. So think long term. One of my big goals is to make a highly successful community of individuals which make good money, are well taken care of, have less regulation, have more tradition, and just do better. And if you are doing well, you are more likely to have your kids stick around, because your kids are going to look around and say, wow, this place is awesome. Your place over there is terrifyingly poor. How are you guys living with all that regulation? How are you guys living with blah, 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 and on you go. And so your monarchy becomes a beacon of hope. It becomes a beacon of prosperity. So you got to do things and think smart. Just don't think whatever is the easiest is the best thing to do, because that's not always true. We need to be careful and serious. So that's one of my big goals. If you can get property on the water and really dig dig into that area, dig your claws into that area, you'll do 1,000 times better. Become a little port shipping town, and you will do way better. Plus, you'll be able to pay off the United States government to keep them off your back a lot easier if you have more money. So the fifth thing the fifth goal that I have is build beautiful things. This is so important. It is beyond important because, as Dostoevsky says, beauty will save the world. We should not be doing ugly things. There's no reason for it, first of all. Second of all, it's damaging to your morale long term. It's damaging to your morale short term. Everything that we do, we should be doing to our best capabilities. Whatsoever you do, do as unto the Lord and not unto man. And why does God want ugly things? He certainly didn't build any of those, so why should we? And if we build beautiful, we will be attractive. Again, remember, beacon of hope for the world, because the world is not happy right now. The world is distressed and upset and unhappy, and we can do better, and we should do better. And beautiful things are cool. There is so much more fun than building ugly little block nothingnesses. We can build gorgeous, incredible structures, things like the mushroom houses in Charlevoix. They're not that complicated to build. It's stonework, maybe a thatched roof. You know what? Thatched roofs are not that complicated. We've been building them for thousands upon thousands of years. They last twice as long as asphalt roofs, and they look so cool. And there's no reason to be building with cheap building materials if we can be building smart, if we can be building intelligently, and if we can be building smaller and more efficient properties. One of the big reasons why things are so cheap in building and construction is because people want to maximize floor space. And you pay for it. You pay in repair costs, you repair and maintenance forever and ever and ever because you built with cheap things. You pay for heating costs. It's way cheaper to heat a stone building, especially a smaller stone building, than it is to heat a stick frame sidinged house. It's just smarter to build with higher quality materials. Additionally, my last issue here, the last goal that I would have, is a defensible position, because I do think that it is beneficial to think about being able to defend yourself as human beings. This is something that people have done forever, and there's no reason to believe that the world will get any less violent tomorrow than it is today. Build your community to be able to defend itself, and that will increase your traditional values. That will increase your perception of value in the community. That will increase your community building efforts. Build a wall around your town. The walls are stupid effective, and they're really cool. Tons of people would want to visit a little mini monarchy that's just hanging out off of Lake Michigan somewhere because of their really cool walls and their Port Town, Charlevoix type feels. Their traverse cities, their, whatever your Port Town feel that you want to go for it. Make it beautiful, make it interesting, and people will come flocking to come and see it, especially if it's really quiet and gorgeous there. You plant trees as opposed to just paving over everything with asphalt. There are things that we can do, and we can make it really cool, and we can be capable of defending ourselves because, there's probably going to be another civil war at least, minimum, and it would be a great idea to be able to defend ourselves while the rest of the world is going into, nightmare city. So, I talked a lot more about the defensible aspects in some other videos, so you should go check them out. But the idea about being defensible, you got to think about it. Think long term. Don't always think so short term. So the second thing that we have to do after we have finished defining our goals, those are my main goals. I have some other goals as well, but the main goals, that's basically it. So once you have these goals, it's like, okay, that's great. Now you can talk to other people. Now you can start really defining more of what you want to accomplish. And you get to the second step here, which is you need to draw up a plan of action. And when you're drawing up the plan, you have these goals to be able to really define what your plan is going to be and to influence it, to tell you where you want to go. What is it that you need to actually be working on? And one of the first things that you're going to need to do really is you're going to need to pick land that suits the goals, and then you're going to need to clearly define the boundaries of that particular land and define the boundaries of the effort that you're wanting to work on, define the stages. Maybe you say, okay, the goal is a high density city off the coast of Lake Huron or the coast of Lake St. Clair in this particular locality. You say, okay, these, draw out your circle on the map and say, okay, this particular area for these geographical reasons, for this particular benefit economically, socially, long-term sustainability, the whole 9 yards. Don't build in a floodplain, for goodness sake. Think about these things. Be intelligent, plan it out, and say, okay, this is the property that we'd like to get into. You can't get there. It's too expensive. Okay, maybe, first of all, you need to pick a less expensive property. Let's be realistic. Maybe you need to go way up north. I'm thinking Michigan terms because I live in Michigan and we're surrounded by water, which is an extraordinary benefit. Maybe you're never going to have those benefits. Maybe you're in Texas somewhere and the nearest water is 1,000 miles away. I don't know. Whatever. But you're going to pick your property based on your own particular location, and that's what you're going to focus on. So once you've looked at it, it's going to be way more expensive than you could ever possibly pull off. Obviously, you want 1 square mile, 10 square miles, whatever you need in order to accomplish your long-term goal. You can never possibly do that on your own. Never, ever are you going to be able to do that on your own. That's fine. You have a long-term goal. But your long-term goal has to be able to be accomplished through successive short-term effort. And one of the things that you're going to need to do is start small. You have to think incrementally. You have to think, okay, this plan might take 40 years to work out. It might take 100 years to work out. That's a long time, and I would hope that it would go faster. It'll go faster or slower depending on the number of people that you have involved in your project. But once you've picked out your property, then you need to start studying traditional models of town construction. And one of the really, really cool properties that you can look at is this town called St. Malo. And it's in a medieval walled town. It has a very storied history. And it's really, really cool because it shows how urban density, how traditional urbanism can support high density. It's one of the most interesting places that you can go and look at. And it was originally designed as a protective fortress. It has winding cobblestone streets. It has a medieval urban layout. And with St. Malo, it's like a super authentic medieval because it was destroyed at one point, but they rebuilt it with the intention of keeping it to its original aesthetic. So it was heavily destroyed in World War II from bombings and other things, but they rebuilt it to look like it was part of the original property. And it's St. Malo is awesome because it has a higher density than Tokyo. And it's built like a medieval town. And it's gorgeous inside. It's beautiful. It's aesthetically pleasing. And it's something that is perfectly possible to do. You don't have to limit yourself to St. Malo, but it works. And it's one of the many traditional urbanism models that work for all of the reasons that we described. And, the town like St. Malo can support multiple churches. It can support, tens of thousands of people, even though it's this tiny little area, and it has all of these incredible architectural features. And if you look at towns like that, you can get an idea of like, okay, maybe we need to, knock down some of these siding, garbagey siding buildings in here, and we need to start building beautiful office spaces, beautiful greenery spaces, parks, and little beautiful little cottages and other places that's going to make this place very attractive. And you need to think real estate, and you also need to think getting people into those places. And it has to be a small thing that you do in the beginning that you work towards something beautiful. So you need to have, an architect look at it at some point and say, okay, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could, design all these things. And of course, architects aren't cheap. So, none of this project is going to be for free unless you yourself are an architect, or you can learn how to do it, which great. That would be awesome if you could learn how to draw it up. Maybe you can go on YouTube and learn how to draw up fantasy cities from tutorials and draw up your own semi-functional, property, and then have an architect look at it, and he'll be like, these and this has to change. Then you can have a city engineer look at it and be like, well, this and this and that other thing. But, really for a few $100s, maybe a couple grand maximum, you can do an incredible thing, which is have an enormous map somewhere that anybody can look at any time and reference and say, wow, what an interesting idea. This is your plan. And you can say, this right there, that specifically is what I want to accomplish. And that gives people inspiration. That gets people thinking. That gets people inspired. And when you do that kind of thing, when you have something tangible that you actually have, a physical blueprint, I'm wanting to start a monarchy, and this is what we want to do. Well, I've always wanted to start a monarchy, but I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to do. Well, we should do something sometime. End of conversation. Or check out this map. This right here, see, this location right here has these benefits for this specific reason. It's in this particular geographical location, and it would do this and this and this. Here's a town that it's similar to in Europe that function in this particular way. Here's the history of that particular town. Here's a blueprint of what exactly we want to do. Now people are taking you seriously. And you should be taken seriously because you've done a real thing. This is beyond talk. This is real. And that's what's so powerful about doing this sort of thing. So in the development plan, and in the development stage, the next thing that you have to do, and this one's difficult, but you have to develop law. And I have worked for years on a system of law. I call it the 100 laws, because I believe that your laws should be so comprehensive that they can be written down in a small, cohesive codex that anyone can memorize, that your kids in school can memorize the totality of the laws in a particular location. And I have a lot of reasons for that, but I'm not going to get into that now. So for now, I'm going to table that. At another time, we'll talk about the 100 laws, but not today. You will need to talk to lawyers, and you're going to have to deal with the Constitution. The Constitution in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 says as follows. No title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept of any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind whatever from any king, prince, or foreign state. The Constitution specifically says that you can't have noble titles. That's a pretty difficult sticking point. So the first thing that you need to do is call your local lords names that are not easily recognizable, things that will not raise red flags immediately. Maybe you don't say, I'm the king of Beaver Island. You don't say that. That's insane, first of all. You're not the king of anything. You want to be king, you have to have a lot of people under you, like a lot. If you start with smaller titles like counts, that's a better way to get around it. This is one that's going to take a lot of thinking, not sure exactly what to do, but I do believe in being above board. I do believe in following the laws as much as humanly possible. I do also believe that this law is immoral and should never have been written and is immensely destructive. I can believe that, but it doesn't change the fact that that's the law of the land, and if you disobey it, there will be legal consequences. So, don't have an official title. Everybody can call you, Count whatever, Count James, but you're never going to be able to hold an official title in law. So all of your charters and your system of government is going to have to be basically a common law. And that means it's not written down, it's not codified, and it's followed by tradition, followed by principle, followed by real life action. There have been thousands upon thousands of cultures that have existed in the past that have never written down their laws. So it is possible. This one's really difficult. I don't know all of the ways that you can deal with this. If you have a great idea, put it in the comments below. That would be extremely helpful for all of us elucidate this particularly difficult subject. Should the law exist? No. Does the law exist? Yeah. So now that's going to make things hard for us, but we'll figure it out. We can figure out anything, and we will make this work. And maybe we'll just have to go to court and, be embroiled in legal battles forever and ever and ever. I don't know, but we can figure it out. But as much as possible, when you're developing a plan, be as law-abiding and as quiet as possible. Causing trouble is not a great plan. It's just not. And, it's exhausting, the legal system. It is. It's an absolute pain in the neck, but it's a fact of life, unfortunately. So, the other thing that we can do once we move on is plan on incorporating your own city as soon as possible, which that's going to be entirely dependent on population size in your particular locality. And once you get into a city, this is going to provide an extraordinarily great degree of flexibility in terms of charters, in terms of law, in terms of how elections are done and all that kind of thing. Maybe you have elections in your particular locality in order to be legal, but traditionally everyone just elects the son of the current mayor of your town. You do what you got to do. I don't know exactly, but we'll get there. And it's going to be probably a long time before monarchies are allowed to exist legally. So you might have to just follow the law in name, but not necessarily in spirit. I don't know. It's difficult. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm certainly not giving law advice. Michigan law says that for the incorporation of a home rule village, you have to have a population of 150 as the minimum. But there must also be a minimum density of 100 to the square mile. But there's no statutory requirement that a village must become a city when it experiences a rapid growth in population. But once incorporated, villages may seek reincorporation as fifth-class home rule cities. And that's when you pass beyond the village, which is a basically subsidiary in Michigan of the larger city. So, for example, the village of Indian Village is still governed by Detroit, even though it's, technically its own little village, and they pay all the Detroit taxes and suffer through all the Detroit things. But, they could theoretically incorporate as a city, but it would be very difficult because Detroit would lose tax revenue. And then once incorporated, you can, seek reincorporation as fifth-class home rule cities, providing that your population is between 750 and 2,000. Alternatively, you can seek reincorporation as home rule cities if your population exceeds 2,000 with a density of 500 per square mile. So it would probably also be necessary to, in order to get incorporated, it'd probably be necessary to have this charter, set it up as like a mayor as opposed to, a county. Maybe you'd be the Lord Mayor, I don't know, but mayors are technically acceptable. And then, you'd have to get votes from your neighboring, from your neighbors, and a lot of states require a sign off from the state legislature. So once again, you're never going to get signed off if you're not above board. Be above board in everything. Be beautiful. Talk about the economics. Those are the sorts of things that are going to get you votes from your neighbors. Those are the sorts of things that are going to get you votes from state legislatures. And they're one of the most beautiful and incredible parts of starting monarchies. So there's no downside to that. So the incorporation shouldn't be a real issue, especially if you're really serious about accomplishing that. Unless you have an extremely antagonistic state legislature, which is absolutely always possible. So planning stages. It's too expensive to do a monarchy on your own, obviously, unless you're some sort of billionaire, which if you are, email me. But it's too expensive to do it on your own, so you're going to have a community to accomplish this sort of thing. And you're going to have community collections for fellow monarchists to begin construction and movement into this locality, which you absolutely cannot do until you have a plan. So once you have a plan, people can get interested. You get serious people. You get people who actually want to take action, and you can do things that you would absolutely never be able to accomplish on your own. And that's where things start to get really cool. So obviously, pros and cons to community collections. If you could afford to do it all on your own, that would be wonderful, but you can't. So that's going to bring us to our third stage in the whole planning. We've got our goals, we've developed a plan, we're doing great, but we don't have any people. So the third thing here that we've got to accomplish is you have to collect allies. And the whole idea is academic without people to be a part of your party. And you can do it small. You can start small. You can, if you have people that are really dedicated, that want to do a lot of the construction themselves and who want to begin the process, it's really cool. You absolutely can do it with like maybe 10 families, but you got to get hustling in order to get 10 families. That's a lot of people, and those people have to be serious-minded. They have to be economically stable. They have to be traditional. They have to be good people. And they have to agree with you ideologically, and they have to be cool with the church, getting on board. And, that's the other issue with collecting allies. You have to collect an ally in the church. And the best way to accomplish that is to just talk about setting up a religious community, because that's a huge part of what you're doing. And if you don't have religion to go along with it, well, you need to get that fixed first. So you gotta figure that out. I'm sorry. You just can't believe in nothing. But, realistically, it's going to take several hundred people to really pull it off. A minimum 150 people in order to incorporate a village, basic bro village. And you're going to need to get to 2,000 before you can really incorporate it in a city. So if you're going to be serious, start small. That's fine to start small. But be open about what you want to do, and people will come. I do believe that if you build it, they will come. And I do think also that it's extremely important to be open and transparent about everything with your allies. You should have a plan. People should know what the plan is. People should be able to articulate what your plan is to other people. I think that this is very important. You can do this, but if your plan isn't clear, if your plan isn't well defined, you're going to run into issues where people just don't really know what's going on, so they don't know what to do, and people flail about. Where there is no vision, the people perish. So, and if you're hiding things, if you're being sneaky, if you're stealing money, if you're embezzling, well, everybody knows what the results of that is going to be. So don't start a cult, please. And then you're going to need to start a trust with legal documentation for the funding and support of the monarchist community, because this is going to cost money to accomplish this. You're going to have to provide monthly, quarterly, whatever reports on the money. And once again, I cannot stress transparency enough. It's very important to have a plan, raise money for something, and then execute that something. And put in the effort, put in the work. Be a hard worker, because otherwise it's not going to work. If you want to accomplish something and you want other people to do all your work for you, forget it. Like I said, you got to have the church as an ally. You have to. That's so important for all of your goals. If you can't get the church as an ally, you're in trouble. So that's a really difficult one, but necessary. So keep trying. You'll get there. Reddit, social media, other things can be helpful for finding allies because a lot of us monarchists are spread out all across the United States or spread out over the globe, spread out of whatever country you're in. But you can collect allies over social media, and you might be surprised by how willing people are to meet, to start together with communities, to have a vision, to say, okay, this is what we're going to accomplish. This is what we want. We're going to set this up, and we're going to do this on purpose. And, for every 100 people on social media, maybe one of them will be really serious and solid. It can happen. And once again, do not attempt to collect allies before you have a solid plan of action in place. Do not do that, because if you do that, you will be seen as not serious. You will have a community that's all over the place. Somebody's going to have an idea. They're going to have an idea. He wants to go over there. They want to go over here. Everybody wants to go everywhere, running around like a bunch of chickens with your heads cut off. You need to have a serious plan, and you need to know how you're going to execute that plan. And then you need to be able to share your plan with allies, and you need to be able to share it in such a simple, concise, and easy to understand way that they then are going to be able to share the plan with other people. If you can't do that, you should not be collecting allies. You have gone beyond yourself. You've gone too far. And then lastly, an attempt to develop a monarchy in the United States of America is serious business. And you will absolutely require a lot of people in order to really make it work. You're probably going to have to get 100,000 people in order to get legal immunity from the United States. Probably. If you could do it as an ethnic minority, you would do a lot better. Say if you could get, an American, Indian, Orthodox, Christian monarchy on, tribal land somewhere, you will do 1,000,000,000% better than if you're not an ethnic minority, but that's nothing you can change or affect on your own. But, that's one way that you can get a ton of economic freedom, a ton of social freedom, and a ton of legal freedom. I don't know how to accomplish that. There's no hope for me, unfortunately, not with this going on. But, if you have an ethnic minority, you have a significantly higher percentage chance of accomplishing that. So it is what it is. But it's doable. It's 100% doable. The issue with titles is a little bit tricky. I don't know exactly how to accomplish that, but the rest of it is doable. You just have to be serious, take it slow. The whole point of monarchy is you don't need to rush into it. This is the long game. This isn't like, we got to get the next election. We're running out of time. Not running out of time. This is just life. And doing things slow and careful and cautious works. And, it doesn't mean that you have to be isolated in the process of planning. You can have, some close friends and allies help you develop a plan. That's 100% a great, it's always great to have people on your side in the beginning stages and have a very serious plan developed, but absolutely do not attempt to collect a community of allies before you have the plan. So that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching on the Traditional Press channel. I'm your host, Jonathan James. Thanks for jumping on here once again. Loved having all of you. Please subscribe to this channel. Ring the bell if you can so that you can get those notifications for the next video drops. I try to drop a video every week on this channel. I am dedicated to monarchy and traditional values. We talk about a lot of different kinds of things, so I guarantee you'll always be surprised by whatever's coming up next. Thank you guys. Stay strong out there, and I'll catch you all next time.
This has been the Traditional Press Podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for more traditional ideas and exploration of the why behind the what.